Welcome to the 14 Wins podcast, where we talk about UFOs and all of the related high strangeness. I'm Bones, and with us is Ram X.
Hey, everybody.
Hey, Ram. And what we're going to do is we're going to get back into the groove and talk about the Dogman.
Yeah, I think we will briefly mention the Dogman, but I wanted to switch it up today, and I wanted to wrap some stuff up. Mainly, I wanted to wrap up my assessment of the UAP and UFO phenomenon and its associated high strangeness.
All right. Sounds good to me. So we'll talk some monster stories a little bit and then really dive deep.
Well, I don't even think it's necessary to really dive into the monster stories today. I think I'd rather just skip right to it and tell you how the UFO phenomenon works.
Let's do it.
Let's talk about who it is, what it is, and why they're doing it.
Okay. Screw it. Let's go.
That's kind of how I feel, and maybe it'll become clear why as we talk about it in the podcast. Because I got to the end of my rainbow with the research, where I had started to uncover things that I just realized, number one, no one needed to know. And then there was a number of things that I just realized the world isn't ready for. It's not going to believe. And then I had to go through a moment of going, well, who cares? So by the end of today, I want to wrap up sort of my assessment of what all this was, how it works. And I want to tell you the answer to even the question that I started with, which was, how do UFOs fly? And that was a big one for me, because I think it started with sort of a personal quest for me. And with that sort of scientific question in my mind, which was, well, I'm not stupid. I'm going to find out how they fly. So I felt stupid when I first realized that UFOs were real, and because it had been happening right in front of me my whole life. And, I had believed that they weren't real. And how did something like that get by me? Like, how did something like that get by all of us?
Right.
And I said, well, I'm not stupid, so I'm gonna prove it. I'm gonna figure out how UFOs fly. And as I look back on myself, this is thinking that and sort of shaking my fist at the sky, I just kind of have to laugh. I mean, and that was 4 years ago. And I have to think about how far this research took me personally, and how that affected my story, and how that affects me today, and in so many different ways. But I came to a point in my research where I just wasn't comfortable sharing everything. And I don't think everybody was ready for everything. And I think it has to come in waves, or society won't believe it. But that isn't my way. That never was. And this UFO phenomenon in its process kind of reminded me who I was, and sort of took me for a ride, I think, on this one. And as part of the completion, as part of completing whatever my part in this is me sharing it with you and doing it my way, which is, I come into this, like I told you, as an analyst, and I come into this going, I'm going to go with the evidence and the data where it leads. I'm going to go with the probabilities where they lead. And I hope that I've earned some sort of trust here, because we published that article, The Shape of the Phenomenon, and that was 6 months before David Grush came out and said what he said.
Okay.
And everything in that article has been proven, I think, to the extent that it can be in today's environment.
Right.
So how did we know that? How did I know that? The way I knew that is on our website. It's in the About section. It's the methodology. And I knew that I was being overly conservative when I started this process. I knew I was throwing out a ton of good cases by saying, I'm going to throw out everything that has only one person involved. And I knew I was being stupid when I did that, but I took a view, and I knew that by starting with that view, I was going to see the closest thing I could to the truth. And then I went from there. So I think that was important. And I'm going to mention that because OSINT investigators always love to talk about their secret sauce. So
right.
There it is. That was it. So I took that and I went. I just followed the evidence where it led. And I tried to do my best to use 14 Wins as my notebook for the investigation. And then you got involved, and my friend Stills got involved, who's doing the YouTube videos, which is, by the way, after this episode, where we're going to be moving over to. This is going to be our last audio episode and our last episode in this format. So I really am going to tell you everything. And I really am going to name names. I'm going to name a lot of names. And I really am going to tell you how UFOs fly when they're in a three-dimensional form, some of them at least. I can say that with a sense of certainty.
All right.
All right, I'm going to do all that by the end of the podcast. And then I think my task is going to be complete. So I think at the end of that, I'm just going to go make fun YouTube videos with my friends.
There you go. All right, sounds like a plan. Let's do it.
All right, let's do it. So let me tell you the who of the UFO phenomenon. And maybe the best way for me to do that is to tell you what they look like. And the best way to describe what they look like is a living light. They're an orb. That's what our eyes can see them as. Those are the wizards behind all of this stuff. The UFO phenomenon, a lot of paranormal. I can't say, we're not dealing with multiple phenomenon, but these are the wizards we're interacting with in the UFO phenomenon and the related high strangeness. Are those living lights, those little orbs? Are those projections from a being from somewhere else? Maybe, but they seem to be sentient. And it seems to be like that's what our eyes can perceive them as when they're not trying to be anything else. And then when they are in that form, they can look like whatever. And they can make you think whatever is happening. They interact with your consciousness. They interact with you. That's what's going to be super important to everything that we're going to talk about, is that this is happening on both the material and a consciousness level. And we call consciousness spiritual. Like you could call it religious. You call it what you want, but that's what I'm going to call it, because my religion is science. I'm just honest about it. It's a religion. You want me to prove to you that science is a religion? Go look at Neil deGrasse Tyson talk about UFOs.
Right.
Sounds like a zealot.
Right. It's true.
And that's my religion. So I'm just honest about it. What we're seeing here is just a blending of science trying to comprehend something that's been there all along and that it can't explain.
Mm-hmm.
And it starts with those orbs. So when those orbs want to interact with us on a material level, on a three-dimensional level, and Keel figured this out, they can't. They need something. They need stuff from our environment, and they can engineer it on an atomic level. And we know this because we found the material. And then when they need beings, they manufacture them. And Vallée kind of figured this part out. It's like a video game. When these orbs want to play in the three-dimensional space, they pick a ship, they pick some entities. Those people in the Kentucky Goblins affair were probably dealing with one entity.
Yeah, interesting.
And that one entity was the ship and these little goblin-like creatures. Now, where it gets a little gray for me is that sometimes it seems like it's not piloting those things. Like it makes them real, and then they have some sort of default state or programming, more like bio-robots. And that happens with the Men in Black. Those guys, we never got to that. There's a bunch of stuff we never got to that I'm going to tell you it's real and it's part of it, but I don't need to tell you that the how or the why anymore. I don't need to tell you why there's a dogman anymore. Like, it's because there was an orb. And if it wasn't apparating that shape or making you believe it was there on some sort of a consciousness manipulation level, then it actually created a dogman from genetic material. We're finding cattle mutilation, soft tissue, and it needs material from our world. Does all of that mean it's not extraterrestrial enough? The one thing, again, that I have to write about is that you have to understand how little your eyes see and how little your ears hear. We can't call that material. That's dumb. Right. That's dumb. The wizards behind the machine, as far as we can tell, are these orbs. Those orbs are the ultra-terrestrials. You can go back to our episodes on, extraterrestrial theory versus crypto-terrestrial versus interdimensional. And if there's something behind it, maybe it's in one of those spaces. But that's what we need to know, is that that's what we can see. That's what we understand. And then when they want to interact in our space, they take stuff from our space and they do it. They interact with us on a consciousness level. They seem really interested in religion. They seem super interested in religion, and they appear to be, I'm just going to say it. This is the end here. It's the end of all things. They appear to be the wizards behind trying to enforce religion or make us continue to believe religion. And there are certain esoteric traditions that seemed to me to have this more figured out than others. And one of them was the Rosicrucians. And the Rosicrucians, you can look into these folks and make sure you're looking into the right ones, because there's a lot of fake ones out there, but they're all maybe saying something similar. And it's basically that the world, this unseen world, sort of works where these entities are hanging around and they attach themselves to different religions, and then they support or attack different religions. And maybe they do it the same. Maybe the same entity is both, promoting and detracting from the religion. It's hard to say, right? In this unseen world. But the way we interact with that world is through intention and through things like prayer or spells. And other people have pointed this out, that the relationship between this phenomenon in the Catholic Church is just so infused. It's crazy.
So are we are we still at the point where we are kind of viewing these as guardians in a way, where they're kind of guiding the human race into a certain direction?
So I guess that gets into more of the why, right?
Yeah.
And let's skip around. I don't care anymore. I really don't care anymore. Let's really do this today. Yeah, the why. I think I can answer that best by answering it with a question, which is, what is the intention of humanity? And I don't mean that to be coy. Like, I think your answer is there. I think the intention of these things is based on our intention, and it responds. It's a co-created experience often.
Well, I mean, we have the gumption, we have the kind of natural urge to reach for the stars, don't we? I mean, is that our ultimate goal? Because I mean, we spend billions and billions of dollars to try to get closer to the stars.
It's funny you bring up reaching for the stars, because the reason we got there was partially because of these things. There were three guys who I would say mainly got us there: Jack Parsons, Konstantin Klimt, and Werner von Braun from Germany. So von Braun we took him, and that becomes a big part of this story. We took him at the end of World War II. And the Nazis were deep into this. They got one of these things off the ground. So anyway, Werner von Braun comes here, and he ends up becoming one of the reasons we got to the moon. He says to everyone, like, we can't take all the credit for what we have done. We have been helped by some beings from beyond here. And maybe I can say more about it another time. And then he didn't. And Jack Parsons was into the occult. He was into this Aleister Crowley, sort of magical traditions. And he was going out into the desert with L. Ron Hubbard from Scientology. And they were having all these crazy sex magic and some of these dark magic rituals. And then Parsons went on to create both JPL and NASA. Hubbard goes on to create Scientology. Now, how does it all work? I don't know. That's what they were doing at the time. Konstantin Klimt in Russia was the other reason we have rockets. He thought he was in touch with extraterrestrials. So did Tesla.
Really?
Yeah. They get mixed up in all of it. Our religion too. Science. And that was disturbing to me. All of this changed me in fundamental ways. But I'm telling you what I found, and I'm telling you the truth, and then, probably gonna go into the background. This is what I found, and it went there. Like, everyone's talking about the New Age and the woo aspects of this, and it goes there. And I think I've made my peace with this thing. I think people like Parsons and Klimt and von Braun really were in touch with these things, and they're getting involved in humanity. They're getting involved in human affairs. But do they drive us? Do they drive you? I choose to not believe that. I choose to say, even though I understand now that there is this unseen world, I choose to say, I own my space. I make my choices.
Okay.
I would encourage you to do the same, especially if you're having unwanted contact with these things. And I want to get to that because there were some check boxes here for me. You know, on a personal level, it started out with how do UFOs fly? And then it became, just want to vaguely understand the who, what, why. And then I realized people were being injured. And then, you know, it activated my Samaritan gene. So let's hit all the check boxes. And so the check box of how do UFOs fly? I'm just going to skip right to it. Magnets.
So
Friggin'
manipulating
magnets.
a magnetic field. Somehow.
Friggin' magnets.
All right.
Yep. I could prove it. Yeah. I don't feel like it. It's magnets. And the Nazis figured it out, and they lifted one up. And then there's a few companies in Alexandria, Virginia, who have a patent on something similar to this technology. And then there is public research being done on it, you know, co-rotating opposing magnetic disk. That's there you go.
All right, case closed.
You're welcome, world. Anyway, so we were talking about I guess the why ends up being interesting. These entities seem to attach themselves to different things, and then these esoteric traditions have this saying, as above, so below. And somehow their world is a reflection of ours. I don't know. It still seems pretty human-centric to me. I think we should stop dealing with these things like they're stupid.
Well,
You look at what Skinwalker Ranch is doing.
Yeah.
You know, launching friggin' model rockets at this thing.
Yeah.
Imagine if we were dealing with a tribe. This is how you really have to look at this. Imagine if we were dealing with a tribe of monkeys who were just getting a little smarter. And you could tell that there was some monkey scientists, and they were like, throw coconuts at him, Gork.
Mm-hmm.
See what he does, trying to understand humans. You know, you wouldn't really respect him too much. You'd be like, well, good for the monkeys. You know, I guess they're trying to figure out some sort of stimulus response here. But hey, stop throwing coconuts at me. I mean, that's what the entity is thinking. You look stupid. You don't know what you're dealing with. Like, stop. Just stop. And that's why Bigelow left the ranch. He realized it. You know, they were playing games with this thing, and they realized it was playing games with them.
Right.
Show some respect. You know, I think that's a big change for me in this phenomenon. I don't think I had a lot of respect at first, and now I'm like, yeah, okay, you're pretty darn capable.
Yeah, right.
And then to approach this with our science. You know, with our monkey, the monkey thing was a good example. To approach this with our monkey science, and then to demand that it has to fit into our coconut throwing methodology in order to prove it to the other monkeys. It's never going to work.
Right.
So I'm glad that I'm just coming out and telling you all this, because that's what's happening right now with disclosure. It's never going to work like that. It's going to take something else. I hope that something else comes along. You know, but first people are going to have to en masse accept UFOs are real. And we're not even there yet. And then you're going to have to accept everything that I just told you. That's why I started with the high strangeness, because I said, okay, we're almost there with people accepting that UFOs are real. This is the next thing that's going to get in the way. And I didn't even know the third part of the story at that point. This is the third part of the story, and it's kind of my jumping off point, guys. I don't really do religion. I don't, even at the end of this, like, I feel like I made my peace with this. I was like, you know, I don't really do religion, right? And I feel like it was like, no, you did a good job. Like, you're good. More than that. It was more than that. I mean, I could go into my personal, like, it ended up being maybe that, where for me, I think you have to understand the relationship between us and this phenomenon. It's intrinsic. So I mean, I'm good. And I've made my peace with this phenomenon. I got to tell you, I was standing right on top of one of these entities at Bradshaw Ranch. You can see part of the video, and this wasn't even the scariest part. It was when I got a hold of myself and actually got the camera. But I was standing right on top of one of these entities, and my tri-field meter went up into the dangerous gamma territories. Like it could have fried me, and then it could have followed me home and done all the other things that it's done to other people. And I had people I cared about around me. It could have done it to any of them, and it didn't. In fact, we started chasing it around, and whatever this thing is, like, it had a shot at me and didn't take it, so we're good. Actually, let me finish up on the Dogman and the Sasquatch thing, because here's a great example of how this UFO phenomenon works, and it kind of sums up what we've been talking about in all of these episodes. And we talked about that case where the guy shot the Bigfoot in the last episode, the Bigfoot episode, right? Well, there was another incident that happened all in that same time. It was a little mini Point Pleasant, like a West Virginia for John Keel. And it just involved big Sasquatch instead of the Mothman, right?
Okay.
So there was a guy in that case who got involved in the investigation, and he became part of the investigation team. And he kind of put his phone number out and said, okay, if something's happening here, my neighbors keep saying they're seeing Sasquatch. I want to know about it. So this couple kept seeing a UFO appear outside of their house, and they lived in a kind of a remote location. So they call him and they said, hey, come over and check out this UFO. You're part of the investigation team. He says, okay, I'm on my way. So he comes over, and sure enough, big bright UFO appears in a fantastic fashion right in front of him. And he gets creeped out by it, and he quits that night. So he says, I'm done with this. For the rest of his life, he has hours of missing time. 4 hours. He'd just be driving, and then he'd wake up, it'd be 4 hours later, and he'd still be in the car in a different location.
Well, okay.
Had no idea what was happening to him. And then his grandson, who was born after that, starts talking about these interdimensional, like, demons or demon-looking things. This black hole that appears above his bed, and these things start popping out of it. And for the rest of his life, he's thinking that's because he went there and looked at that UFO. One of the things that we were working on was how to spot UFOs and how to find them. And that was definitely where the research ended for me, where I said, I don't think that's a good idea. I don't think people really need to know. If you want to know this phenomenon, like I told you, it's more of a consciousness thing. And if you want to go out there and bait it, you're taking your chances. So I'm not going to be a part of that. And in fact, I want to wrap up with those people who are what we'll call unwanted contactees or abductees. And I'm sorry I never got to talk more about them, but I think we talked about the worst case, which is possession.
Right.
And abduction, these repeated abduction events are related to the same phenomenon. So the best I can offer you in mass, because I don't have a technical solution for this, and I would like to find one. But Gary Nolan is working on that, and I think he's probably better suited for the task. So I hope he does. He said he's looking for a switch, and I every time he says that, I get a little hopeful, because I can't imagine what these folks are going through. The best thing that I can offer you is, based on my research, is to find some spiritual or consciousness related remedy. And that could mean a lot of different things to you. And I already told you, I don't think these entities are, relegated to one specific religion. But religion seems to be one way to access or appeal to them. And there seem to be others. But it would require maybe some sort of cleansing or a spiritual help in order to maybe remove that.
So you mentioned that you feel that they encourage religion.
Yeah, they seem to want to be worshipped or perceived as angels or demons or gods or devils or, what they really are. Who knows? But yeah. So when we talk about pagan and fairy, especially we bring up the fairy because that was a big one. That just means non-Christian. So when it gets into our, and I'm telling this story from the perspective of the West because that was the information I could find the best about. Yeah, and especially the Catholic Church. So one thing the Catholic Church, here's a revelation. One thing the Catholic Church is covering up, and I'm 99.9% certain about this, is evidence that there was a lot of Christian writing about reincarnation. And they've been covering that up for whatever reason. They've been covering up a lot of things. Our history, what I found, and I would just sum up my assessment of history with the fact that somewhere, along the way when academia really got going in the West, everyone decided that the world began with Genesis and the Bible and spread out with European colonialism.
Right.
And that is a complete falsehood. And what I found in history wasn't one conspiracy to keep all this stuff hidden. I found many. Everyone has an agenda. The island of Malta and Gigantia is heavily involved in this, as well as of several all these megalithic sites. They're involved. I'm sure of that now. And there were other types of human found at those sites. And I don't just mean elongated skulls that were non-human, because those are found. And like I said, I think those are genetically engineered. Those are little orb vehicles. And as far as I could tell, and I think they can go on autopilot too. And when it creates something that looks exactly human, which it can, then it can possess it as if it were human. And it can also possess people as if it's human. And it also seems Keel was really, this is where, this gets a little creepy, but this is where Keel was right. I think I'm going to get into think territory, and I'm also going to name names. Something we've never done on these other episodes, huh? Which is, Keel thought some people in his day were in touch with the phenomenon, and it was up to no good. And some people were in touch with the phenomenon, and it was good. And hey, that's what today looks like to me. You got Chris Bledsoe and his family talking about the phenomenon, and their experiences are positive. It healed him, and they're saying positive things. And then you've got people like Stephen Greer, who are saying all abductees are just victims of the government, and there is no evil phenomenon.
Right.
Why is he saying all that?
Yeah, good question.
Mm-hmm.
He's saying all that with his eyes bugged out and all intense,
Oh yeah.
He knows how to sell
froggy. Yeah, looking all froggy. Yeah, I don't. Screw him, man. I'm done. I'm done with a bunch of. I'm gonna name a bunch of these hucksters. Yeah, he's a weird one though, and that's why I think he may actually be in touch with the phenomenon, because he's mixed all this disinformation. I think it's disinformation that comes from the phenomenon with real information.
Mm-hmm.
And then he's been caught hoaxing and other stuff. So I obviously I don't think much of him. Let's put it that way. And let's name some of those. This is fun. Let's do some of these. And I know there's some you've been wanting to name for a long time, Bones, and we held back, right? We were trying to be diplomatic. I'm done being diplomatic. Go for it. Name him. Who's the big one? Who's the big one?
The one that always pops up is Bob Lazar, right?
That's the one.
Yeah, and he has a lot of followers too.
Oh yeah, doesn't he? And again, we've been trying to play nice. We're not going to play nice anymore. Bob Lazar is a con man. He's definitely a con man. I looked into him pretty hard, but I did the smart thing, and I talked to independent researchers who'd looked into him for years and got a bunch of details. So he did work at Los Alamos, and I think Knapp's reporting confirmed that. But the funny thing about Knapp and Corbell, he's a hype man. What are you going to do? But Knapp, I think, genuinely got Lazar wrong. I think Knapp's an honest guy, and I just think he got Lazar wrong. My opinion. Lazar did work at Los Alamos, and then the story I got, the one that is most believable, was that he was working there and he was some form of lower level tech, and that he liked hanging out at the bars, and he was big into ufology, and he was a science nerd from, and the only educational record he has is from Pierce College. And when he speaks like a scientist, and I have had talks with other scientists, and they say he doesn't really sound like he's even got a master's. He's claiming 2 masters and whatever. And
so he liked the scene.
I could go into the litany of lies that he has told. But that was the first clue.
He was into the scene and did a little side pimping. He was in the groove.
Yeah. He was into this scene. He was reading about UFO stuff, and he knew some people, and then took it all to the next level. But because he was talking about active stuff that was being talked about in ufology at the time, he was right about some of it. That's what I think happened with Lazar. He keeps saying he didn't make money off of it. That's demonstrably false. So we've told you about, character and taking people for a ride and how we go about evaluating character. And Lazar is a con man on every level. You watch those interviews with Rogan, and I'm like, how could anyone ever believe this guy? The physical tells are all over him. Yeah, so Lazar's a huckster, but I got the same story that Chris Mellon got. He was on Rogan, and he said, this is the story I got. And he's like, I don't know if it's true or not, but this is the best story I got. And independently, I can say the exact same thing. I don't know if that's the truth or not, but that was the best story I got. And he was also, he got involved in all sorts of other shenanigans over the years that then he's, I'm just a rock and roll UFO scientist right. Selling science materials. Sounds like a good marketing hook, Bob.
Yeah, right.
Oh, that was a fun one. Let's do some more. Oh, let's talk about people who might be intelligence piss boys. Stephen Greenstreet, who has a history of working for the State Department and did some really great videos that are on YouTube. I don't think people know that these were his. He did It's Redacted, and those are a really great series that I would watch on YouTube. But then he's just been weird and attacking people in a weird way. So, he might be. He might be one of those guys on the take. Then there was the other guy that attacked Grush, Ken Klippenstein. Yeah, definitely. I like him for that. He looks to me like somebody who was on the take. There's a couple journalists you can add to the Philip Klass modern day list. Here's someone I think has just gone south is John Greenwald, who runs the Black Vault. And we couldn't be nicer to him on 14 Wins. We talk all about how great it is that he's gotten all these FOIA requests released. But then he just can't stop attacking whistleblowers.
Right.
And he calls it journalism. Like, you can't stop attacking whistleblowers. All these people with Twitter accounts that are calling themselves journalists that just can't stop attacking whistleblowers. Like, you are a huge part of the problem. If UFOs end up getting stuffed back into the box, it'll be at least in part because of you, because you've served the intelligence community's needs by just attacking everyone who comes forward from the government. And the ideas from the UFO community about government and how government works are so naive. It's just disturbing. Like, there's 15 departments in the government. The Department of Transportation, Department of Defense, Department of Education. Like, each one has a secretary. I don't even want to go into it. Like, and when people talk about the government conspiracy, the deep state, nothing like that could possibly ever work. And that's what threw me about this. I was like, nothing like that could possibly ever work. And it's amazing how they made this work. And Ed Grush kind of gave us the little insight of that. They used the Manhattan Project secrecy over this. And they've never taken it off.
Right.
This has been under Manhattan level security since 1930s. So the president can't just declassify it.
Right.
And it's going to take Congress to dig this thing out. And then who's at the bottom of it? As near as I can tell. Here. Well, let's name names. I'm naming names today. This is fun. We should have done this in the first episode. So let's talk about where it is. Lockheed has some, Skunk Works, Radiance has some. Here was something that came up, during the research, that one of those things that I just wanted to pop off about at the time and didn't. But Eric Weinstein was saying, where are the physicists? Like, if the UAP phenomenon is real and it's being studied, where are the physicists? Radiance Technologies. I just come on and go, Radiance. They're at Radiance. Right. Go look at Radiance. Who else knows? NASA. Big time. Yeah. Bill Nelson, all the top. Probably some NASA. And it sounds like it's happening more recently, that all of a sudden more and more people are knowing. It might be, this disclosure might be happening, y'all, but more NASA. So they're the top at NASA, and then a bunch of the astronauts. There were experiences.
Right.
But then the experiences were more like what I'm telling you. There was like, they encounter a ball of light and had some weird stuff happen, guys. Like,
right.
They didn't encounter a gray and get taken on a ship and go a jamba dance.
Right.
This is what it is. And this is not something people will accept. And that's like, we're so far away from it. I don't know. It's going to take something big to get people to accept this. And that's another reason I'm glad to be stepping away a little bit, because I don't want to try. We didn't even promote 14 Wins. Like, we spent $200 in promotion the entire 4 years. And I know how to do all that stuff. And all I did was make the site SEO technically perfect. I said, if people want this information, then they should be able to find it. That's it. And that got suppressed. And that got censored. And I know why. I kept saying, I don't know why. I know why. It's because it's me. It's because it's RomX. That's what I've been fucking telling you the whole time. They don't censor me for nothing. They don't let Tom DeLonge pop off for nothing anyway, about the exact same shit. And you know what? People should pay attention to him. Some of the stuff he's saying, I think, matches up with what we found. And I think he goes too far. DeLonge goes too far. Valet goes too far. They're going too far. They're theorists, and that's what they do. And Valet's a physicist, and he wants to make sense of it all. So he wants to make it work with his control system idea, which there's maybe some evidence. Like right there's a periodicity, and from what I can tell, the periodicity that I can determine begins around 1900. And then every 30 years after that. So there was a lot of stuff happening right around 1900, and then there was a lot of stuff happening right around 1930, and there was a lot of stuff happening right around 1965, 66. There was a lot of stuff happening around the 90s. That's when Skinwalker Ranch exploded. The 60s were right when Point Pleasant and Keel's time. Skinwalker Ranch exploding 1996. And that brings us to today, brother. We're living in it. We're living in this version's periodicity, and the peak periodicity, whatever you want to call it. I don't even care anymore. So that's I think how it all works. And will this time, because I know in the 60s they were like, oh, they can't stuff it back in the bottle. They sure did,
Yeah, right.
Are they gonna be able to do that this time? I think maybe. Without help from the phenomenon, I think they will, because people are not going to accept what I just told you. Keel told you almost the exact same thing 60 years ago. And that gets into my weird experiences. I guess I was like, I wasn't going to tell my weird experience, but my weird experiences all involved Keel. Him, specifically. I picked up Mothman Prophecies, and the way I found Mothman Prophecies was a little odd. This is when I first started getting deep in the research, and I within 2 weeks had gone, oh my god, there is a cover-up, and UFOs are real. And unlocking that was the first step. Because once you understand that there was a cover-up, and that's why I tried to do that in the first episode. So unlocking that was the first step. Because then you look at everything with a different set of eyes. And then you realize how big this phenomenon is. And that brings us back to who controls it. Because that's being controlled by a very, very small group of people. And I told you some of the places where I could find them, which was NASA. The other place is old money.
Ah.
And I said it in the beginning, Chris Mellon's involvement in this is very, very interesting. His ancestor was there at the beginning of the CIA, which was founded right after they got the Italian crash. Maybe he has the sway. But then how do you disclose this? How are they going to disclose it?
Right.
I was watching the Soul Foundation. I'm really rooting for those guys.
Yeah.
But I was watching the Soul Foundation's videos last night. I'm like, how are you going to disclose all this? This was my version. This hour-long podcast that we're doing right now. And so, the hitchhiker effect. Hopefully you take that story in that I told you about the Westmoreland case and the guy who saw the UFO and then experienced missing time, and his son experiencing something that was like demon visitations. That was the hitchhiker effect, y'all.
Yeah.
Like, that's how it worked. That's how it works. So a UFO sighting is an event. Now, in that case, my guess would be that this is how I think it works. My guess is that was one of the orbs, and it apparated whatever was that it was showing them that its craft looked like in that case, because it didn't need to be three-dimensional. And then seeing it, when they were visually seeing one of those orbs, it's looking back into them, inside of you, I guess. And then it can make a connection. And it didn't make a connection with the other people that it had appeared to the other 2 nights before. That guy showed up just one time, and that's all it took. So, right set of genes, right antenna, you call it what you want. That's how it works.
Is that it?
I don't know. You understand how that would work with cryptids. If it needs to spawn a cryptid that is going to interact with something, it needs something that is three-dimensional. If it doesn't, it can just appear whatever and make you think you're wherever.
So is it productive to actually create a UFO cult? Because if you gather enough minds together believing in the UFO phenomenon or whatever they are,
worshiping,
will they show up?
Oh, let me drop some Mo truth bombs about that. More I prefer to give you like things that I found that maybe give you insight that I can be pretty sure about. So let me get into the ancient history, probably the most interesting thread that maybe you and I will pull on, which is other types of human were found. Other types of human, not NHI, other types of human with elongated skulls that did not have cranial netting or head binding. They were elongated skulls, similar to like the Nazca mummies, and they were human.
Okay.
And these guys get found around where these megalithic sites are found. And it's connected. And then where those are found, your tunnels get found.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. And boy, are there some interesting inner earth cases. But as far as them wanting to be worshipped, these entities seem to work you have to look at folklore differently now. You have to look at folklore as an encounter with, and this is what Teddy Roosevelt was doing back in the frontier days. He started noting which ethnicity someone was, and then what types of folklore that they'd be most interested in, because that was going to color their account. So you got to go into some of these folklore accounts and you pull out what you can. And the big one, here's a big one this is a good example of these entities in action, is the founding of the Mormon Church.
Oh, yeah, of course.
And Joseph Smith was what's called a scryer, and that means a crystal gazer, like gazing into a crystal ball.
Right.
And this is we were going to talk about remote viewing anyway, but yeah, it's real and everyone can do it. And there's a Netflix movie about eyeless sight right now, and about a guy who stares at cards and could see what's underneath the card, and then became rich and gave money to charity. And he did that by staring at the cards over and over for hours a day and practicing these mental acuity tricks. And that's remote viewing. Everyone can do it. Some people can do it better than others, but he developed that skill. And so that's a skill that Joseph Smith was trying to sort of do with a crystal, but back then they were doing it to find treasure. They thought if you could stare into what's called a scrying stone, or like a crystal it often was, long enough that you would actually be able to see treasure, or something would show you treasure. What you're doing when you're doing that is you're demonstrating an intent, and you're extending your consciousness. And a lot of folks believe, myself included, that Joseph Smith really did encounter an entity. And that's a weird story. It ended up being a very enigmatic, weird story, and Joseph Smith ended up dying in a very bad way. But he did found the Mormon church, and so, that's powerful. And the Mormons are super into this topic. Harry Reid, Brandon Fugel.
Right, Harry Reid, that's right. He's a Mormon.
So they're aware of the connection here.
Right.
And they're dealing with it on their own. I think they're hoping it's ET or something. I don't know. Star beings get wrapped up in their religion too. And their religion's not opposed to it. Whereas the Council of Nicaea was such a huge change and such a pivotal moment in this phenomenon that before then, you got to understand, Christianity was completely different. Jesus' name wasn't Jesus. It was Yehoshua. They renamed him 300 years after he died because they thought there was too many Yehoshuas and it sounded a little too Jewish. And then there's the Christian work itself, which it was more like your God versus my God. Like there was people who were saying the Hebrew God versus Baal, and they were having these sort of entity fights. And this is supposedly, allegedly, how the occult works, how magic works. The biggest name in the occult probably was Aleister Crowley. You heard of him?
No, that's not the guy who. That wasn't the guy who was into Satan worship, was it?
The answer to that one is he probably would have worshipped Satan if it thought it got him power, and he also liked calling himself an antichrist.
Yeah, is that the guy who's on the Eagles Hotel California album?
I think he is.
If you look at the album at the hotel, you zoom in, you can see that guy, and he was like a famous kind of occultist.
He was.
Yeah.
Perhaps the most famous occultist of his day. This is where there's this research the occult research ends up getting wrapped up in it. I didn't want to believe that when I started. There were already books and people who Tom DeLonge and Peter Levenda is the one who had done a lot of occult UAP related stuff. And again, I think Peter Levenda's work is great, but it gets pretty thin in terms of he casts a lot of occult hypotheses for everything, and I think he says that at the beginning of his book. He sort of looks at the world through, well, what if everything was affected by the occult? And you got to understand that occult just means religion. It's just not Christian religion for the most part. So when like pagans and fairies, occult religions, there were Gnostic sects, there were occult Christianities, and then there were diabolical occult stuff, and then there was the Crowley stuff. Other people who were more into alchemy, and alchemy didn't really die out as a science among gentlemen or professionals until all the way into the 20th century, and then it's still practiced today. That's what Joseph Smith was doing. He was doing alchemy.
With his metal plates.
Yeah, dowsing. They try to use metal rods to find treasure, and then so when you're doing that stuff, you've got something that acts as a anchor, a physical anchor, right? And then you also are demonstrating your will and intent on a consciousness level, and I think you can attract something. And those alchemical spells, I'm not a wizard, dude. I mean, that's why I'm getting out of this. Like, I'm not a wizard. I don't want to get involved in that. But
it does sound like they're talking about the super spectrum again, in a way, right? Keel's super spectrum.
I tie it back to my science because I'm not a wizard. I mean, I think this is all science we don't understand.
Yeah.
And I think this is the super spectrum, and these are beings that are outside of our material plane, and they like playing little supernatural folklorish games with us. And yeah, sometimes you can get them to do what you want, and sometimes you can't. Sounds a lot like us.
Yeah. I mean, when you hear Grush talk about, and I always mention it, but it's the cube. What were they? 30,000 feet higher.
Yeah.
The cube that was in a clear sphere. I still think he's getting a glimpse behind the curtain. You know, I still think that. I don't know if it's the instruments, our modern instruments on the aircraft are manipulating it in some way, making them appear.
Yeah.
But when you see stuff like that, he's seeing the cogs, he's seeing the gears behind.
Maybe. I mean, and if it didn't have to interact with anything physically, then, you know, it can make whatever, it seems to be able to make whatever it want appear.
Right.
And it also could be you're glimpsing more of reality than we see every day.
Yeah.
And that is the conclusion here, I guess. You know, if I'm trying to wrap up this sort of messy assessment, which has been all of our episodes together, there's an unseen world. Keel was right. I'd say Keel was more right than Vallée, but Vallée fills it in. Vallée makes it more practical and makes it more functional. I don't know about Vallée's control system and how far he goes with the interdimensional stuff. I mean, I would stop at entities. That much we know. And then there's Tawny's work, which definitely bears note. I mean, the connection between these things and these megalithic structures and tunnels and inner Earth exists. There's definitely a connection there. As far as where we could find out a lot about this information, here's where disclosure could really happen, is if the Vatican Library really opened their doors.
Yeah.
Because that's who controlled history this whole time. Like I said, there was a concerted effort to try to make the world begin with Genesis, expand with European colonialism. There was a concerted effort to make that lie true.
Yeah.
And we'll never know. That's the sad thing. So one of those sites in Gigantia, one of the archaeologists that found one of these skulls and proved that they were human of another sort, said he witnessed other archaeologists destroying evidence at the site of anomalous nature, giant handprints.
Really?
Yeah. Weird shit.
Huh.
Oh, we're going to swear in this one, too.
Wow, we got a lot to look forward to. Phase 2, we're swearing.
No, in this one, I'm just going balls out.
Oh, okay.
Hopefully, that sort of marries all of our work up to date. And I wrote on that Shape of the Phenomenon article that I wasn't going to be doing another update to that article. This is it.
Oh, right on. Well, I mean, we have phase 2, and I guess we should direct everyone to the website because that will still exist. And
oh yeah,
we're just
the website definitely exists, and we're going to publish a bunch of information. I'll come back.
Right. Good stuff, and more to come. So thanks for listening, everyone. This is the 14wins.com podcast.
Thanks for listening, everyone.